I think anyone who, is curious about getting into real estate and, isn't sure which direction is best, I think the important thing is that you do. So you do something, whether it's, you buy a single family home or you invest in a syndication or, you get into note investing. I think the important piece of it is that you get out there and you do something.
You're listening to Investing for Good, a show that brings you the stories and strategies of people who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. And now, here are your hosts, Annie Dickerson and Julie Lamb.
Hey everyone, I'm Annie Dickerson here with my co-host Julie Lamb. Julie, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Annie, how are you?
I am really excited about this episode because this is our first one that we're going to try as a solo episode, meaning just you and me, no guest. As much as we love our guests and they bring such a wealth of knowledge to the show and to our listeners, I think it'll be fun just to talk you and me and to share our wisdom and our experiences with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it because I think all too often when we are interviewed on other people's podcasts, we don't really get the opportunity to deep dive into our stories and the little nuances that sometimes as a listener, you're thinking, oh man, I wonder, I would have loved to hear more about that part of her story. And because it could be the thing that helps someone else, get to where they're trying to go by understanding how somebody else before you did it. So it should be fun.
Well, you said something before we started rolling, which really resonated with me. And it's something you've brought not only to your real estate investing journey, but also to our business. So you said, growing your wealth isn't just about, building up the numbers. It's about taking a look at what you have and really seeing, how you can make the most of it. So Can you speak a little bit to that and how that played into your real estate investing journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think, that's always what I didn't come from money and I don't come from a lot, and everything I have, I built myself. And so it's always like, well, this is all you have, and you got to figure out how to make the most of it. And I think a lot of that came from my upbringing with my mom, and single mom raising me, only child. And it was like, Julie, this is what we have to work with. And so it was always no siblings, right? Only child. And so it was like, okay, no company, and it's just my mom and I, and you have to kind of make the best of it. And so I think, just even my upbringing was really how I got to this mindset of okay, if this is all I have, how can I get to where I'm trying to go with what I have here? This is it. 3 pieces of rocks and some sticks and trying to make a fire, And so anyway, as it relates to real estate, so we bought the townhome in 2009, and that's really where we started. And
where was that?
That was in Oakland. Oakland, California. And if anyone from the Bay Area remembers what happened to the home prices across the Bay in Oakland and Alameda area, they basically tanked from 2006. It was literally 2006, 2007 to 2009. So it was maybe 2 years or so. It was a brand new condo. The price someone had paid, 2007, double what we had paid for this property. And it was the worst time. Nobody was buying, And I remember, as I've talked about in podcasts and whatnot, but I remember standing in this huge townhome. What was huge for me up until that point, I had only been a renter of rooms and small apartments, but it was a 3.5 bedroom townhome with 2 full baths. And I remember standing there with my agent and thinking, asking her, Laura, what are we going to do with this? It's just, it's just my husband and I. What are we going to do? And she said, well, you could rent it out and offset your mortgage payments. And I thought, that's really interesting. And so we ended up buying the home, and we ended up house hacking and, having other people rent out the rooms. But there was this one room downstairs. And so it was three full bedrooms upstairs, 2 full baths, and then a half bath downstairs. So right when you walk in, there's a half bath on the right, and there was a den, but the den had no door. And it was just a library area with a door-ish. And there was nothing to kind of block it off from the rest of the house. So you walk in, and then there's the kitchen, living room, then you take the stairs upstairs. As we were renting it out, and the upstairs bedrooms were rented, we were living in the master and we rented out the other 2 rooms. every day I would walk past that room and think, what a waste. Like, this is such a waste. Like, I've got to figure out a way to, capitalize on this, because there was a half bath right across the way. And so I just started like thinking, okay, what can I do with this? How can I make this an area that somebody would want to use? And thought about doing like kind of a co-working space, or, renting it out that way, or even just putting it on Airbnb and seeing like what happens. It's just a room without a door and there's a half bath right there. But then I started to dig further because the numbers weren't matching up, right? It was like, I wasn't getting the maximum that I thought I could get from that room, because it's like, yeah, I could do but co-working wasn't really a thing back then. And who's going to want to sleep in a room with no door with a bunch of other people coming and going? So it was like, I just kept seeing the amount that I could rent it for just go down, down, down. And so then I thought, okay, if I wanted to rent this thing out as an actual bedroom, what would I need to do to make it an actual room? And so then I decided that I was going to put a door. I was going to install a door. And I went out and started looking at all the pricing of doors. And so we ended up settling on a sliding glass door. It's huge. Like the ceilings were probably like 10, 11 feet tall. And so the doorway was really big. It was probably like maybe 5 or 6 feet wide and 7 feet tall. And so this door though was like $3,000, and it was a lot, but it was nice, went with like the style of the home. And I had to ask myself, and this was when like the gears started turning for understanding real estate, like how much am I investing? And I started doing the math. Okay, like if I could rent this room out for $550 a month and it cost me $3,000, how many years would it take me to make up that cost and then actually start profiting from it? And so we went out shopping for the door. We installed this fancy door and made it into a bedroom, and we ended up renting it out. And I think I was getting, by the time we left, I think initially I was getting about $500 a month. And then by the time we left, I think it was like $550, $575, something like that. And the way that I pitched it on Craigslist back then is where I used to post the rooms, is that it was almost like your own sort of kind of like a master your own bathroom. And that's the way I pitched it. I said, you have this room with a closed door, and right across from it, literally 3 feet, was the half bath. And that would be your bath. And then you would share a full bathroom, the shower and whatnot upstairs. And so that was kind of the way I angled it, and got $550 a month, like in additional revenue from this room that was sitting there. I don't even think at the time I used it as an office. So it literally sat there for a number of years, just empty. So anyway, that was like, for me, really like the beginning of like, really understanding, okay, how can I take what I have and maximize this and make more money off of it? And
It's like our coach always says, it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness. And the moment that you start thinking about things in that way, it opens up all kinds of doors, no pun intended with your door story. But so wait. I want to rewind a little bit even further than that. So for people who may have never house hacked before, I can imagine that they're thinking, wait, you live with strangers in your house? So you had 3 bedrooms upstairs, you said. And so you rented out 2 of those bedrooms. Yeah. And how did you find those people? Were they off of Craigslist, and did you interview them? How did you know that they weren't going to like vandalize your house and steal all your stuff?
Yeah. I think we did. I think I just did Craigslist back then. Like there was, that's where you went, and I'd interview them, and I found a lease on Googled it and found a lease, and I used that. I don't know. It was like some, the realtors, whatever, it was California Realtors Association, like standard lease, used that. Was nothing fancy. And and that's how I found it, was on Craigslist. And I did do a background check. So I spent the money, forget whatever it was, $30. Actually, I think I made them pay for it. I said to apply, you have to pay the background check, and it checks their credit. And we got this one, I still remember his name was Sam. Interesting guy. I swear I don't know, maybe I was delusional back then, but I swear he was like, had food in his room that he would keep in jars, like old food. And I don't know why he was doing that, but it started to smell. And it was the room that was like the closest to ours. Of course. And it was the worst. And I brought it up one day, and I told him, I said, I smell something, and I've started to see fruit flies and whatnot coming around. Yeah. And he sent me an article about like almost like saying that I was like hallucinating or something, that there weren't really like flies in the house and that something like this can happen. It was the most bizarre thing. Anyway, he didn't last very long.
Yeah.
But yes, they were strangers and they were people who I didn't know. It's similar to when you have roommates in a house and you're, at a dorm where you're going to college or whatever. And that's kind of how it was. But, it's much easier to do that when you don't have kids and you're not, my husband and I weren't married at the time. And so it's much easier to do that. Live that kind of a lifestyle before you actually have kids,
Yeah. Besides the fruit flies, did you have any conflicts between them or between them and you? Anything that came up where you had to step in and put on your landlord hat and be like, this is the way it has to be?
Not really. I'd say that that's one thing I've always been pretty good at is assembling a team and like picking the right people. And in a sense, it was kind of like a team, it was like a group of people. How can I make sure we all get along and everybody respects each other's space? But no, never really did. And one thing that we did do after we moved out of that house and just had it as a rental was we hired a housekeeper to come in every other week. And so it did add like an additional expense. I think it was like, I don't know, back then it was probably like $70 to clean the whole place, which is crazy because it was a pretty big place. And so I just deducted that. And again, put on my, analysis, like profit and loss, like if I'm spending, an additional $150 a month, is that going to be worth it? Is it going to, resident retention? Is it going to keep people there longer? Is it going to reduce the amount of conflict and keep the house clean? And that's exactly what it did. I still remember when we sold that place 7 years later, my agent, she said, wow, Julie, you've had roommates here for the last, like at that time, like, I don't know, it was 4 years or so. The place looks amazing. And it was because of the fact that we hired a housekeeper to come in, I think number one. And so no one had to do anything. They didn't have to clean. They didn't have to do anything. And then number two is just like picking the right, people so that people get along well. And I think by the end, the people that had been there for 2 or 3 years, renting a room for 2 or 3 years,
Yeah. I mean, as a landlord, as a real estate investor, you have to take into account, which expenses are worth it and going to protect the value of your investment over time and which ones that you can forgo. So I love that. I think that's such a great idea to hire a cleaner to come in and really protect your asset. Yeah. So you lived there how long with roommates? And then it sounds like you kept it then for a few more years after that.
Yeah, I lived there for 3 years on my own, and then we rented it out for another 4. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah,
that's a long time.
It was. Yeah, it was a long time, and I think a lot of the skills that I use now really were developed in those 7 years that I owned the property, and in a small way, it was kind of like, it wasn't a multifamily property, but it was 3.5 bedrooms. So it's like, how can I turn this into somewhat of a multifamily opportunity in that I didn't want to just rent it out. After we moved out, we had a choice. Do we keep it renting it out by the rooms, or do we move everyone out and just find one family to rent it out and take the whole thing down? And as I was going through that process, I thought to myself, if I move everyone out and I get a family to live here and they rent the whole house, if they leave, my income goes from 100% income to 0% income like overnight. And so for me, it was a kind of a way to hedge against, vacancy and income loss, right? Was by renting it out by the room. Because if one person left, I still had, 70% of the house still rented, or, whatever, depending on which room it was that was vacant. And because I was picking the right people, I wasn't having like a lot of turnover, which I think when people think of renting by the room, they think, oh, it's going to be a bunch of hassle. People are always coming and going. Right. But I also kept the rents like, this is again, like where this started was like, okay, what could they get if they went somewhere else? And what's comparable? And I would keep it kind of just below that. So it would be like in their mind, like, oh man, The last thing I want to do is go out there and move all my stuff on a Saturday morning, to save myself $15 or $25 a month or whatever it was, know. It was always just this, how can I price the rents like just above or just below, depending on the time. When we first started renting it out, it was 2009. So it was like, it was not really like the best time to find qualified renters anyway. Yeah. I still remember at that time, I had a bunch of people coming, older people who looked pretty like well-established folks that were applying to rent the room. And I was just like, and they would tell me like, I've lost my house. It was so sad, and they said my house got foreclosed on and I recently switched to a new job. And it was like, well, like, there are some people would say my credit was decimated with everything that's happened. And it was a rough time that first year. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but aren't sure you have the time or the desire to manage the investment? Perhaps you're afraid, like we were, that you'll make the mistake of choosing the wrong mortgage or the wrong team and lose your entire investment. Well, that's exactly why we created the Goodegg Investor Club. We do the work of identifying solid real estate investment opportunities in the best markets around the country and then partner with you to acquire these investments, and then we'll all share in the returns. We'll identify the growing markets, strong, experienced teams, and the solid deals. We do all the heavy lifting of managing the tenants and the renovations, and as a passive partner, you get to enjoy all the benefits of investing in real estate, monthly cash flow, long-term appreciation, and the ongoing tax benefits. When we first discovered passive investing through real estate syndications, we realized it fit perfectly into our busy lives. We could put our money to work for our families, work less, and get more time back in our days so that we could focus on what matters most and discover our true passion and purpose in life. We've now helped hundreds of people invest passively in real estate syndications and are seeing the positive impact it's had on their lives. We invite you to partner with us by joining the Goodegg Investor Club today so you can start putting your money to work for you and get more time back in your day, because we know that when people have more time in their days, they can do the true work they were intended to do, and the world will be a better place. To sign up for the Goodegg Investor Club, go to goodegginvestments.com/invest and we'll take it from there. That's goodegginvestments.com/invest.
But it's so interesting hearing you tell this story, because you're right. Even on a small scale, a single family home, you were able to apply so many of the things that we always talk about in multifamily, about making it more efficient and looking at the bottom line and seeing the long-term value. And I love hearing you talk about, why you chose to rent to roommates instead of choosing to rent to a single family. I think that's genius to sort of hedge your bets on that front. In terms of because I know you were self-managing during this time. So not only the tenant issues maybe between each other, or maybe there weren't so many there, but what about on the maintenance side? Did you have repairs that you had to take care of during this time?
Not really. Well, with one of our properties we did, and my husband was the handyman. So anytime there was like an issue, husband would go over there and check it out. But not really. Most of what we owned were newer properties, so there just really wasn't a lot that came up. And then obviously when you own a condo, anything, behind the walls is not really your responsibility. So, which is good. But then of course with that comes usually a hefty HOA fee, which we did have. But not too much. I don't work really well with like properties that need a lot of repairs and whatnot. It's just,
you never know what you're going to find behind the walls.
Totally. Yeah. I like dealing with stuff that cash flows or that's maybe even less cash flow, so that I can have peace of mind.
Yeah. So speaking of cash flow, I know it's been a number of years since you've owned this property, but do you remember at what point were you cash flowing right off the bat once you rented out those bedrooms upstairs, or at what point did you start to be able to cover your mortgage and expenses and then also have some left over?
I don't know that with this one, the very first one we did, I don't know that we ever got to that point. It got close, but to covering expenses, we were also paying more than we needed to on our loan. If we weren't doing that, then we probably would have been cash flowing a few $100 a month. But I had accelerated the loan payments so that we could try to, get out of the loan sooner. I don't know why I was doing that. I don't know if somebody had said, oh, do a 15-year loan. And I don't know. I don't even know where that came from, but I was just like this idea of like pay it down faster. And the cash flow was almost there. Like I said, it got to the point where we weren't even, paying anything, very close to that. And so it was like, well, I don't need a couple $100, so let's just put it all into the property.
Right. Oh my gosh. I love that story. Even though, most people write off like little investments like that. They're like, oh, I'm house hacking just for now, but I want to get to the big stuff. I want to get to the 200 unit apartments like you guys do, but I think you learn so many valuable lessons doing those smaller properties. And, you and I are, even though we're doing these bigger properties, it's not like we've written off the smaller ones. We're still actively managing some smaller properties. And you learn some things through those smaller properties that you can't at that larger scale. And then when you apply them to those larger properties, it helps in so many different ways.
Yeah. And I think anyone who, is curious about getting into real estate and, isn't sure which direction is best, I think the important thing is that you do. So you do something, whether it's, you buy a single family home or you invest in a syndication or, you get into note investing. I think the important piece of it is that you get out there and you do something. Of course, when you're ready and you've educated yourself, don't jump in head first into anything you don't understand. I think I heard that on a podcast once. If you don't understand what you're investing in, you shouldn't be doing. You have no business investing in that. I know one other thing that we wanted to talk about real quick before we wrap up is the transition and the moment that when I went from just owning a couple properties to getting to where I'm at now, and really it was. Gosh, I want to say it was like 2013 or 2014. And we had 2 kids at that time. And, we had paid off all of our debts. I think all we really had at the time was our mortgages, no credit card debts, nothing. And we had money saved. And it was like, okay, now what? And I kept going to financial advisors and sitting down and having these important meetings that I thought they were going to help me retire early and get rich, and not get rich quick. I wasn't necessarily after that, but I was, after help me grow my wealth in a way that is not this long horizon of like 30 years from now, but something that I can expect to happen within the next maybe 10 to 15 years. And everyone that I went to, just no one had the answers for me. And the conversation always went around mutual funds, stocks and bonds, and life insurance, which, we bought way back when. Term life insurance is like product, and fees. And I was just like, okay, so you guys seem like you're making the money here, but we're not. And it never, and then no one. And then when I discovered real estate and this whole world that we live in now, I understand why those financial advisors never told me about all of the different things we know about now. And the reason is because they're not compensated to do so, right? And so it was just an eye-opener and I still remember when I fell into bigger pockets is really how I discovered this whole world. And I just remember thinking to myself, my goodness, this is where all the secrets are hiding. And I just, as everyone says, fell into this rabbit hole. And that was really, the eye opener for me was when I discovered bigger pockets and when I discovered all of the secrets, so many secrets. Instead of doing a 529 plan, do this, which, now as I'm sure, a lot of people in the audience know, I like to, and we both do, like to use whole life insurance policies in conjunction with our investments. And, how am I leveraging leveraging that as a strategy for college savings. They're not going to tell you this kind of stuff in the mainstream, right? And so, from that all the way into, discovering, short-term, like hard money lending, and this idea of really having your money out there working for you, not collecting 1% at the bank or whatever it was back then, 0.75%, but making, I think at the time it was like a 10% return on your money, which was like, wow, and it's just a different like mindset. It's like, okay, if you've got $100,000 and you, instead of parking it here for 3 months, you park it here for 3 months. And instead of making 0.75% return, you make 10% return on $100,000. We're talking thousands of dollars. I still have the check hanging here in my office. The first check that I got from my hard money lender, or from the person that I worked with, he was a flipper. And yeah, it was just mind blowing to me, because it's like, this is an alternative. Now, of course, you have to make sure that it's safe and you have to vet the people that you're working with and all of that stuff. But yeah, it was mind blowing to go from all the traditional stuff to realizing there's alternate ways to do the same thing,
Well, that's the perfect way to wrap up this conversation, because everything that all of you just heard Julie talk about, those are teasers for future conversations that we're going to have. We're going to dive into things like 529 plans and whole life insurance and all of that stuff in our journey and more, because, that's why we put together this podcast in the first place, is because all of these alternative investments, these things that mainstream Wall Street isn't telling you about. We've done a lot of work to dig through the clutter and to find these strategies. And through Investing for Good, we're sharing that with all of you. And then we'll continue to share all of those strategies and those tips and what we're learning through these solo episodes as well.
So much fun.
All right. Well, with that wraps up this episode. Join us next time, and we will have even more to share about our journeys in real estate.
You've been listening to Investing for Good, the #1 podcast for people like you who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. For more resources, check out goodegginvestments.com/podcast, and be sure to join the Investing for Good Facebook community. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you amazing new conversations every week. Until next time, keep investing for good.